Okay, there we go. Let's try that. Is there audio now? Hopefully there is. But I was just saying that I actually, for the brew today, I have a real live Starbucks, and chestnut praline is my favorite drink at Starbucks, but it only comes out at Christmas time for like a short period of time, like 3 weeks they have it. And so, in fact, it doesn't come out in the fall. I wish it would come out like when they get pumpkin spice latte, you get chestnut praline, but nope, it doesn't come out. It doesn't come with that. It only comes out at Christmas time. So I was super lucky. The Starbucks in the Target at Posner Park, FYI, in case anybody cares, has chestnut praline left. And so, of course, I had to get a venti. So I have my venti here, my venti chestnut praline extra hot latte. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about dyslexia. And so there's a lot you can cover with this, so not to keep it too long, we're going to kind of explain a little bit about what dyslexia is and kind of how some steps to help it. So dyslexia is usually comes up, it's difficult for people to read. And one thing to remember is you don't like outgrow dyslexia. It kind of, it stays with you your entire life. It's something that happens. And the number of kids that are dyslexic ranges differently according to the research. Some people say it's 5%, 10%. I've read some places that's even 17 to 20%. 1 in 7 children have dyslexia, so I'm not really sure. But it is probably one of the most common reading and writing events. Now, I do have to say that it really shows up in reading comprehension, spelling, writing, and mostly in math. Those areas it comes in. Now, this is really kind of near and dear to my heart because I am dyslexic, and I do have to say the number one thing that it shows up with me is in spelling. I have never, this is like true confessions time, I have never in my life been able to pass a spelling test. In fact, when I was in college in Comp 1 and Comp 2, thanks Miss Crutchfield and Mrs. Van Manen were my teachers in college, my comp teachers. Miss Crutchfield in college had a spelling list every week, and it was to kind of help your grade, boost your grade. It was an easy 100. Well, it was an easy 100 for everyone but me. I failed that spelling test every single week. And to this day, I'm a horrible speller. I mean, praise Jesus for spell check and people who proof your work, because I cannot spell at all. And yeah, and my sister's watching. She just said my mom is too. Yes, my mom is very dyslexic. So I've tried to do some research, and some people say that it is hereditary, that different people, it comes in the family. I'm also left-handed, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. And so is my mom. She's left-handed also. So I've tried to do some research, but they're not really sure where it comes up or where it shows. But for me personally, it really shows up in spelling. I can't remember how the words go in order. And it shows up in different ways, in different things. In fact, I make my B's and D's backward to this day. I remember a year ago, I was subbing chemistry, and I was writing this big, long formula on the wall for chemistry, and I was doing, and it had B's, and I really froze because I couldn't remember how to write a B or a D. I was doing this big, long formula, and I couldn't remember which way a B or a D went. And so I had to do it, and they're like, no, that's not it. And I had to erase it and redo it. So for me, I still can't remember B's or D's. It throws me up. There are many a card my mom and dad have growing up that say, I love you, Dabby, D-A-B-B-Y, and I couldn't remember my D's and B's. And some of them say D-A-P-P-Y because P's, B's, D's. I just flipped them all over the place. I couldn't. I even mirror wrote a lot when I was younger. So all those ways it shows up, even backwards. But it is a very common issue. Now, I know we probably don't need to say this, but I have to put it anywhere. But it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. It's not a problem with that. It's not that they're not as smart as their peers or different things like that. It's just, it's a way of thinking. So someone told me it this way, and this is the best way to explain dyslexia, all right? A typical person in their brain has filing cabinets in our memory. And so when you forget something or can't remember something, a typical person will go to the filing cabinets, the brain goes to that filing cabinet, pulls out information. A person that's dyslexic, their brain, when you walk into their room, instead of filing cabinets, they have papers everywhere. There's no filing cabinet. There's just piles and stacks of papers everywhere. And for them to find a piece of information, they have to dig through all those stacks and find the paper. So a lot of times it'll show up in multiplication tables. People won't remember. People won't remember multiplication tables, different things like that. And it's because it's like that. It's there. So it's a processing disorder. It takes a few more seconds for you to remember. So a typical person can remember like this, especially multiplication tables. A person with dyslexia, it's going to take 3 times longer. So if you've ever worked with your child and they're like, oh, it's right there. I think I know it. I just can't remember it. And it happens all the time. And you're like, well, you knew it yesterday. Why don't you know it today? Or you know this. We just went over this. How come you can't remember it now? It's because I swear our brain gets stuck for a minute. I just got, you can't think what you're doing, your process. And a lot of times people link it kind of with the ADD, the ADHD. Sorry, all of a sudden everybody and their mother's messaging me on Facebook, and I'm getting tons of text messages. So sorry about that. I have to clear off my screen. And then I just lost my train of thought. So ADD, a lot of people will think that you have ADD, and I do. Like, I get distracted. It makes me the best teacher ever, because if someone is tapping their pencil, it distracts me. I lose my train of thought, and then I have to go to that student. So I understand I can't teach sometimes if there's a lot of noise and it's not super structured. So the same thing with kids with dyslexia or ADD. They get distracted very quickly with it. But here's the plus side. You're a different type of learner. So usually with dyslexic, you're a very, very visual learner. So if I sit in a classroom and see it, I can remember it. I think our brains kind of overcompensate. So you have to do things that are very hands-on, very, very, very visual. Sometimes in preschoolers, things you can tell to see if they're dyslexic is they can't rhyme. They can't tell the beginning sounds of letters. So sometimes if you say bad, what's the first sound? Can't tell, because lots of people think that reading is a visual skill, but it's not. It's an auditory skill. So if you can't hear the sounds, you can't learn to read. A lot of times as they get older, a child with dyslexia can't memorize sight words. They can't remember what the words are. I find a lot of times we have kids that come with us for tutoring that need help because they haven't read in reading. A lot of times schools are not teaching phonics-based reading. They're teaching memory reading or word memory. And so that works really great until about 3rd or 4th grade when there's too many words to remember. So I was super lucky because my parents, like I said, my mom was dyslexic and my mom was a kindergarten teacher. And so she taught me, and I was homeschooled from 3rd to 6th grade. So she really worked a lot with me one-on-one. And I learned how to read very, very phonetically. So I read really phonetically, and they worked really hard with me. And as you can tell, I love to read. It's one of my favorite things. And to go on with it, a lot of times it goes with reading comprehension too. Another thing you can notice that a lot of dyslexic kids or children will do is they will skip over words when they're reading. They can't read it. They won't read every single word. I was lucky too. Another thing is I was taught how to look ahead and read a phrase at a time. Keep all those little words there, because sometimes, like I said, it's a processing. Our eyes are only picking up the big words, the main parts of the sentence, what our brain considers important, because it goes a little bit, it works a little bit slower. Here's another example. Fill in the blank questions are really hard sometimes. Multiple choice and matching are much easier. If you're talking, an example for me is you're talking about a movie. I can see that person's face, but I can't ever remember the actor's name. It's kind of like that for students, even in history. They'll remember the picture that's on the page where that answer is, but they can't specifically remember that. So there are a couple things that do go with dyslexia. ADHD is one, trying to stay focused. Slow processing sometimes goes with it. There's also visual processing where you're not good at reading. Now, there's dysgraphia, which is your ability to spell and form letters and numbers and organize your thoughts on paper. A lot of times dysgraphia comes with people who are in writing, and sometimes I think I have that because I really, really don't like to write. It really sucks my will to live. I mean, even answering emails take me forever because I have to think in what sequence it does. Something oral like this is much, much easier. And then there's dyscalculia, which has to do with numbers, reading and math in addition. So I don't have that numbers part, so I have a degree in advanced math. Math was easy for me. Now, memorizing multiplication tables was not easy. But math concepts in general was easier for me to learn. I remember being in like 6th grade, middle school, and deciding that I needed to know these multiplication facts and memorizing them on my own and working really hard on my own. So in the state of Florida, if you go and get an assessment with our public schools, dyslexia is not diagnosable in the state of Florida. So for us personally, you have to go to someone who does separate evaluations in our area. So Polk County, where I live, the only place I know that really does dyslexia testing is the Treatise Center, which is all the way in Tampa. Expensive to get a specific diagnosis for dyslexia. If you get it done through, if you get an assessment done through the public school system here in Florida, they will say that you have a processing disorder is how they'll kind of say it is. So here's what will help you if you get one-on-one. So a lot of times the advantage is, the only way to do it is for you to really work one-on-one with that student. Memory work is always going to be hard and is always going to be a struggle. For me, memory works really well when it is repetition. Okay, repetition is the key to learning. I say that over and over again. So if you're learning a large passage of scripture, for me, it was rote memory, saying it, the whole thing, 3, 4, 5 times a day. And eventually at the end of 3 weeks, I would have it just from that rote memory. Now, a lot of times we don't have that. So I decided, and I learned through college and different things, that I need something visual. So for everything that I memorize, history, or science or different things, I put a visual picture with it. So I remember random facts because I remember pictures that go with the facts. That's the way to do it. Have something visual to go with what you're memorizing. That's why multiplication tables are so hard, because there's no visual to go with the multiplication table. Now, my favorite thing, this will come up later, but if you are dyslexic and you are trying to learn the multiplication tables, there is a program called Times Tales. Times Tales, phenomenal. You wouldn't think it would work, but it does. It's just the best thing that ever happened. So I will take time later, probably a different time, to go through Times Tales, because it really is one of my favorite things. And the reason it works is it put pictures and stories with your multiplication tables through the rote memory, so that they remember the story. Sorry, and I have the beginnings of this bad cold, so actually it's just enough to be annoying, but not enough to really be a cold. So if you're memorizing facts, do it with a picture, okay? So to this day, I remember Mao Tse-tung was the name of the ruler in China, and I have a picture, and when I say his name, a picture of him pops up in my head. So I started to memorize things. I learned to memorize things through pictures. That will go with it. I can do that. Another thing is if you're if you're learning to read, so if you're going with a younger person, they're learning to read, there's a really good system of reading called Barton. Very expensive. There's 10 levels to read all the way up. It's about $300 a level. You could almost completely get your money back from buying it because you can resell it for almost the same price. Great. It's an Orton Gillingham style, hands-on reading if you have someone who's really having a hard time. Now, it's really slow. It's not going to work overnight, and it's an everyday thing. That's for a younger child if you're teaching them to read. Even an older child that might not have that real phonetic awareness or has just tried to word memorize through. There's that. Would be the best thing now. I always tell if you're older and you're trying to, and you're still a slow reader, listening to books auditorily are great. So to this day, I'm not a huge music person, but I will put music on in the background. Or not music on in the background. I will have Audible going all the time. So I love to have a book going. That's how I listen to most of my books because I can do it. So sometimes as someone who's dyslexic too, I think they can process two things at one time. They can kind of do have something going on TV and something going on with their hands. A couple things like that. So really, I'm going to try to wrap it up here. So here's the main things I want you to take away. Dyslexia is something you struggle with your whole life. I don't know if it's a struggle, but you just have to compensate. Each person has to learn how they study and how they learn. I know for me personally, a study group does me no good. For me, a study group is social time, fun, okay? So that's not where it is. I have to sit quietly by myself to learn on purpose. I will always struggle with memory of things that I can't put with a picture. That's why spelling is hard, multiplication tables, learning how to spell a word. You can learn it phonetically, like spontaneous, break it up into syllables and sound out each syllable. But to this day, I still can't hear if the like spontane is that E an E or is it an A? Because I know sometimes A says E. So things like that, okay? So you have to, you're always going to kind of struggle with those type things. But the best thing to do is just have your student figure out what works for them. We can give you lots of strategies, and there's I think we're going to post it later on the blog. There's all kinds of resources now for dyslexic students, way more than there was when I went to school. It wasn't even a thing that anybody talked about. But so takeaways would be pictures. I can't tell you enough how to do something visual to learn with that. All right, hopefully that was a little bit of help. If you have any questions or any comments or anything that you find that really works. I know somebody put down that they have Orton Gillingham workbook that seems to be helping. If you could in the comments put specifically what Orton Gillingham workbook you use, because really that helps other people and other families who are trying different things, and maybe what grade levels you're using with that. But hopefully, and if you have any questions, let me know. Also, we're on Instagram and Twitter, so follow us and let me know if you guys have any questions. And I look forward to seeing you on Friday morning with an extra shot of espresso.